This is a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource officer. Let's go to the courtroom for today's segment number 4.
Yeah, as soon as I get Mr. Igosh and Mr. Gomes back, we'll go back in the May I change the battery real quick? Highlighter on the top and then the thing on the bottom is for the phone. Yeah. You actually declare it? Oh, very cool. Tell me when you're good. You're good? All right, I'm going to go back on the record. State versus Scot Peterson, 1971-66 CF10A. I continue to have Ms. Gomes, Mr. Kilgore, Mr. Klinger present for the state. I continue to have Mr. Igosh present with Mr. Peterson, who likewise is present. We are outside the presence of the jury. State, anything you need to address before we resume your presentation?
Judge, not so much address, but I just want to make Your Honor aware of something. Mr. Igosh has agreed to stipulate to our records custodian, who's our next witness, which would have taken a substantial amount of time.
Okay.
We have one more substantive witness lined up for today, but after that, unfortunately, Your Honor, I apologize.
Okay, so are you calling the records custodian?
No, I think we're just going to stipulate.
Okay.
If you wanted to stretch out the day, Judge, I could take back my stipulation.
I don't need to stretch out the day. So we'll do the records. We'll do your last live witness for today. I have a short docket tomorrow. I was going to ask the jurors to return at 9:15 with hopes that we could start at 9:30. Does that work for the state?
It does, Your Honor.
Does that work for you?
Yes, Your Honor.
And just to give Your Honor.
You go.
Okay. Well, no, I'm talking about your ownership.
Right.
Tomorrow, Mr. Igosh asked if he could put one witness on who's going on vacation for the rest of the summer. State has no objection.
Okay.
I told him after lunch.
Tomorrow?
Yes.
That's fine. Okay, not a problem.
And this is the stipulation when you're ready to log.
Yeah, do you want to do this in front of the jury or do you want to do it now?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to let you know that I spoke to Ms. Wilcox, and she said since there's 8 different packages, we're making it a composite, so they'd all be in one folder.
And these are, and that state's exhibit right now.
That'd be
M for identification, and
Yes.
what is it?
They consist of various records from DSO that concern training that was completed by the defendant, the contract between DSO and Parkland for SROs, and a listing of his training summary.
All right, so these are, I don't even know if you call it stipulation. You want to move these into evidence and you have no objection?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're not going to do it through a witness.
Right.
It's just going to be moved into, you'll ask to move it into evidence. I'll ask the defense if there's any objection. There being none, it'll come into evidence. I guess that'll be state's exhibit number 13, the composite exhibit. How many different packets of information?
8, sir.
8.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask the state, when they come back in, then I'll ask you to proceed. You can do that, and then I'll say you may call your next witness. And then you're telling me that'll be the last witness today, correct?
Thank you. Yes, Your Honor.
Understood. Okay. Please bring the jury in.
Jurors entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Once you're back at those same seats, you may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Once you're back at those same seats, you may be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you using the notepads, I'll give you a moment to get the notepads back on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, when we took our restroom break, we were in the middle of the state's presentation. We're going to resume at that point. State, when you are ready, you may proceed.
Judge, the state calls the captain.
Well,
I'm so sorry.
Your Honor, at this time, there's been a stipulation between the defense and the state to enter states M into evidence, and as a composite of 8 different documents.
defense, no objection.
No objection.
All right, so without objection, states M for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 13, a composite exhibit of 8 separate, I guess we'll call them business records.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
State, when you're ready, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Judge. Now the state calls Captain Nicholas Mazzi.
Sir, if I could have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please. Once you reach it, before you have a seat, you can just stop and look at me, please.
Yes, sir.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Please be seated. And once you are seated, please put that chair all the way up as far as it will go. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
Nicholas Mazzi, Nicholas, last name Mazzei.
Ms. Gomes, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, Captain Mazzi. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury and tell them where you currently work?
My name is Nicholas Mazzi. I am currently a captain with the Cedar Coral Springs Police Department.
How long have you been with the Coral Springs Police Department?
22 years.
Can you give us a little bit of a background information on your time at the department, the different places you've been assigned to, units,
Originally started at Road Patrol, patrolman for 4 years. I moved into our Vice Intelligence and Narcotics Unit for about 4 years. I was promoted to sergeant after that. As a sergeant, I oversaw patrol. I oversaw street crimes unit, our strategic enforcement team, which is like a street crimes unit, bicycle unit. So I have had a couple of different supervisory roles as a sergeant. Promoted as a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant on Road Patrol, and last year I was promoted to captain. In addition, got on the SWAT team 21 years ago. I've been on the SWAT team for 21 years. I've moved up through the ranks, and I'm currently the SWAT commander.
Can you explain for the jury the structure of the SWAT team so they understand what it means to be SWAT commander?
So as the SWAT commander, I am tasked with being in charge overall of the entire SWAT team, making tactical decisions on call-outs. I'm in charge of the budget. I'm in charge of basically anything related to SWAT. Underneath me, I have an executive officer who takes care of trainings, making sure we're getting the proper training, documenting our training. Underneath them are our team leaders, and our team leaders are the ones, we have an operation, who are tasked with going out and making sure the operation is done to what the XO, the executive officer, and myself as a SWAT commander need to be done.
Were you yourself a team lead at one point?
Yes.
And explain for the jury, as a SWAT commander, what trainings have you been through? How does SWAT school work? Just so we have an understanding of how frequently you all practice wouldn't be the right word.
Train. As our SWAT team, we're very fortunate as a SWAT team in Broward County. We do get to train twice a month. So and it actually turns out we end up making it 26 trainings in a year. Every SWAT operator is required to go to a 2-week SWAT school. We ourselves at Coral Springs Police Department have actually hosted SWAT school for the last 7 years with myself organizing the school, instructors underneath me teaching. I've taught many times at SWAT school. I've been to many different National Tactical Officer Association courses, from team leader development to SWAT command decision making. So quite a bit of training related to the SWAT team.
What are some of the training topics that you've taught or attended?
More specific, you name it. I've been to so many different types of SWAT school. I've been to hostage rescue classes. I've been to rappelling classes. I've been to armorer classes. Armorer, basically, working on guns. I've been to range instructor, range master. So quite many different kinds of schools related to being on the SWAT team.
Explain for us some of the training that you've done, whether it's through SWAT or just as a law enforcement officer, on how to render aid.
We get extensive training in Stop the Bleed. We're very fortunate. So in our SWAT team, the way our SWAT team is set up, we do have medics that are assigned to our SWAT team. We've been very fortunate with the medics that we do have. They're excellent medics. They're very vetted. They've gone to a lot of courses. They bring what they learn back to us and train us. We do have one medic who is on the team. He's even gone as far as having our SWAT guys go out to live tissue classes where they actually use live pigs and do full-on scenarios and try to keep a live pig alive for 45 minutes that have been given a catastrophic injury. So we've had the opportunity to do a ton of training like that. I personally have not been to that particular training, but many of our guys have. Even as our department pushes training all the time. Every officer carries tourniquets. We've had chest seals, and we've done that for a long time. I think we were maybe towards one of the first agencies that started really incorporating medical aid with our guys. It was really pushed by our training unit, and then again, being on the SWAT team, we train it a couple times a year. We train it. We go up to Camp Blanding. We've trained it. We've been to a couple classes up there where we've got it from the military guys. So we've got a lot of medical training.
Is the importance of stopping the bleed, tourniquets, chest seals, is that something that just SWAT people get, SWAT employees, or is it all law enforcement employees are trained on it?
All law enforcement employees. Our agency is very big on training, stop the bleed, and chest seals, and tourniquets, and rendering aid.
When you say tourniquet, I'm sure it's common knowledge for some, but just in case, what is a tourniquet?
A tourniquet is basically it's a strap. When somebody has a catastrophic injury, it's a tourniquet. It goes around a leg. It is strapped down tight, and then you basically twist it until it basically stops somebody from bleeding. People with arterial injuries can bleed out very quickly, very rapidly. That's why our SWAT medics are, really pushed us to make sure that we knew how to use tourniquets and do stuff like that because of how quickly somebody could die with a catastrophic injury.
What if you don't have a formal tourniquet with you? Are law enforcement officers trained on what to do if there isn't a tourniquet?
There are some measures that you could do. There are stopgap measures, in which you basically use even before you get a tourniquet on, and basically that, for instance, if somebody had a catastrophic leg injury, you might put your knee right on top of the femoral artery, in their groin to stop the bleeding until you can get someone either to you with a tourniquet. You can make a makeshift tourniquet if you can find something, a belt, something that could work. But the important thing is you need something that will help you really tighten down that tourniquet. Just pressure alone isn't going to do it. You definitely need you need someone to get a tourniquet to you.
Captain, can you explain to us, are you familiar with the acronym POE? Priority of life.
POL, priorities of life?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, POL.
Yes.
Priority of life. Can you explain for the members of the jury what is priority of life?
So priority of life is basically a matrix that police officers use to establish the importance of life on a given police call. And it breaks it down into 4 groups, from the most important person on a police call to the least important. The most important person would be hostages, if there are any. The second most important person would be innocent civilians or people in the area. The third most important people are police officers. And then finally, and they do get a spot on the list, is the suspect or bad guy, because all life is valuable. They are considered on the priority of life. And basically what it does is it establishes a matrix for the decision-making process for police officers, supervisors, tactical leaders, on what risks they're willing to take based on who they're dealing with and that priority of life. Basically, the most important to the least important when making decisions.
When entering an active shooter situation, are you taking into account the priority of life?
Absolutely.
I'd like to turn your attention to February of 2018. What was your title or rank at that time?
At that time, I was a sergeant in the strategic enforcement team, SAT.
At around 2 o'clock in the afternoon that day, where were you?
At 2 o'clock, I was on the second floor of the City of Coral Springs Police Department building. We were having a meeting with our special operations component and our captain. So all the special operations component were in a meeting on the second floor.
Explain to the members of the jury what happens while you're in your meeting.
We were fairly well into the meeting, and over the radio, I believe I heard Sergeant Reed say something about we're getting reports of an active shooter at Douglas. Our dispatch got on the air and said, yes, we are getting reports of an active shooter. Our phones are blowing up, were the exact words that were used on that radio transmission. And at that point, it was run downstairs, get in our cars, and head up towards Douglas.
If you recall, approximately how long did it take you to get to the school campus?
I am not quite sure of the exact time. I believe it was around 2:25 or so when Sergeant Reed made his transmission. And I believe that I was at the school at like 2:31-ish, 2:32.
When you were on your way to the school, explain for the jury what's going through your mind. What is your understanding of what you're about to do?
My feeling is I'm going up. I know that I'm heading towards an active shooter event based on the transmissions that were being put over. You still don't necessarily believe that it's real, clearly, because it's a major event. But I'm preparing myself mentally about what I need to do when I get there.
When you arrived on the school campus, where did you park?
I came up I came up Pine Island Road. I had made a left onto Holmberg Road, so I was heading west, and I went into the second entrance to the school.
Your Honor, may I please use the mail? Captain, I'm showing you what's already in evidence as states 1. You have the screen in front of you. Are you able to view the image on the screen?
Yes.
Your Honor, Okay, may I have the editing feature turned on?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yeah, actually, you
I
can
can.
see if you can erase it from the previous witness.
Excellent, thank you.
There you go. And then you can actually change it to right. There you go.
Perfect. Okay, Captain, I'm going to ask you to please mark on this map. If you just touch the screen, it should.
Jeez.
Mark for us the location that you parked your vehicle when you arrived.
Right there. Actually, it might have been right outside the fence, just a little bit further back, so more. Jeez.
Oh, I'll erase and you can redo it. There you go.
Right there.
Ms. Combs, this is going to go on the screen, correct?
Yes.
Right in that area there.
Okay, on the top of the screen, correct?
Correct.
All right, give me just a moment. Okay, so you parked your vehicle off of Kohberger Road, and what did you do next?
Immediately grabbed my rifle. The way my vehicle was set up, I have a rifle that sits right over my head in a rifle rack. Grabbed my rifle, pulled it down, racked around, and ran up towards the school.
As you're running in the direction of the school, could you show the jury using the pen which direction you went?
I went from here and I ran this way.
What happens when you arrive outside of the 1200 building?
So as I'm approaching, as I'm making that run, I catch up with Detective Monzone, Sergeant Monzone at the time. He works for me. I got to him, said let's go, and we ran up towards the school building, and we could see Aaron Feiss laying dead right outside the west doors.
As you're running towards the building and you see Monzone, what's going through your head when you see Monzone?
I don't know that I was thinking anything other than I need to get inside the school.
Did you have any conversation with him, like should we go in, should we not?
There was no conversation. We both have extensive training on active shooter. We knew what we were going to do. We knew what we were supposed to do, and we did it.
You both run towards the building, and when you see Aaron Feiss, what do you do?
We had no active stimulus at the time. There was no active shooting. We didn't hear anything. I thought it was important to check him for vitals. I did. He was clearly deceased. Then I went back to the active shooter protocol. Even though we didn't have the active stimulus, it was still, there was nothing more I could do for Aaron Feiss. We needed to get in the school.
You just you prefaced the fact that you stopped to check for a pulse based on the fact that you didn't have stimulus. Describe for the jury what stimulus is, just briefly, and then why that would change the steps that you're taking.
So stimulus would be screaming, yelling, shooting, most importantly shooting. If there was active shooting that we had heard inside the school, we would not even have stopped at Aaron Feiss. We would have gone directly into the school and continued through the school until we located the shooter.
If there's active shooting inside the school and you're alone, do you still go into that building?
Yes.
After you check Aaron Feiss and you realize that he is deceased, which doors do you go through? Do you go through the west or the east side of the building?
We entered right there through the west doors into the hallway.
And I'm going to zoom in. Now, before you go into that building, you said you reverted back to active shooter. Why did you do that?
There was nothing that we could do for Aaron Feiss at the time, and I knew that there were people that had been shot and were dying inside the school. I fully believed that there was still a shooter inside the school, and I felt that it was important to get in there.
When you entered the school, explain to us what you do next. What's the order of steps you take? So
we breached the door. We didn't have to breach it, but it was unlocked. The door opens up. We make entry into the school, and eerily quiet. It was kind of smoky filled. There were rifle rounds on the ground. You could smell burnt gunpowder from rifle rounds going off, and we made entry into the school.
Was it clearly visible just upon looking into the hallway that something had gone awry?
Yes, that and the fact that Chris Hickson was right in front of me as I made entry in there, and he had clearly been shot several times. He was still alive when I got to him.
Just go into the TV's gonna have to go off, please.
Yes, please.
Court Deputy, the TV's gonna have to go off, please.
And for the court's reference, I'm now playing what is already in evidence as states 6F10.
State, just give me 1 second. Court Deputy, if we got him? We're good, Judge. Okay.
Aaron, can you go back in the house? I'm going to ask you to let us know when you see yourself on screen.
That's me. And that's Scott Myers right behind me, pointing at the third floor windows.
Who is Scott Myers?
He is currently Captain Myers. At the time, he was Sergeant Myers. He's a police officer at the City of Coral Springs Police Department.
Hit pause.
Judge, can we use sidewalk wall?
Yeah, sure.
Now, Captain, is that Mr. Hickson, Chris Hickson?
That is Chris Hickson. That is in front of me.
Okay. At this point, is it your understanding that you are to believe that there's still an active shooter inside the building as you're operating through that building?
Yes, I tried to get information from Chris Hickson, but he wasn't able to talk. He could not provide any information to me. And at this point, I believe that there's still an active killer shooter inside the school.
I see you pointing your rifle into the hall. Why are you doing that?
So I believe, again, there was still an active killer in the school. Again, not having any stimulus, you know, that evacuating Chris Hickson in that position is not necessarily an active shooter protocol. But the fact that there was no active shooting going on at that time, I felt it was important to render as much aid as we could, at least get him out, get him to people who could give him the proper first aid and medical care. But again, that's not necessarily active shooter protocol to treat. Again, this will sound bad, had active shooting started right there, we would have abandoned him right there and moved towards the active shooting wherever it may have been inside that school.
Why would you do that?
Because although Chris Hickson is injured and in dire need of medical care, the longer you wait, or as I'm stopping, or if I was to stop to treat him, more victims are being made by the shooter further on in the problem, on the second floor, third floor. As someone rendering aid, I could never keep up rendering aid to everyone else who the shooter was killing. So it's important that you break off, as hard as it may be, move towards wherever the killing is going on, find the shooter, and stop the threat.
We can see on the video that there's obviously blood loss. Explain for the members of the jury why time is of the essence.
You're just going to bleed to death. Bullet wounds are catastrophic. They cause catastrophic injuries. The rendering of treatment in a situation like this most likely is going to come all from police officers, and because you've got to stop the bleeding. You can't live if you don't have blood in you. You don't have anything to circulate. So stopping the bleeding is the most important thing that needs to happen in that situation.
Based on your training and experience, is it a matter of seconds or minutes what can determine how much blood loss is fatal?
Just from training that we've had, a femoral bleed, I believe you can die within 2 minutes. Depending on where you're hit in the chest or body, you hit an aorta, you don't have very long to live.
After you removed Mr. Hickson from the building, what did you do next?
So Gil Monzone, he and Bryan Wilkins ended up taking Chris Hickson out of the building, took a golf cart, evacuated Chris Hickson away. Myself and Scott Myers were in the school at the time. At this time, it was just him and I that were inside the school, just basically covering down the hallway and waiting for the next stimulus to prompt us. We were ready to start moving through, but we were waiting to basically hear gunshots. I was fully convinced we were going to get in a gunshot or a gunfight in that school.
You're on the first floor. You don't hear any gunshots, so where do you maneuver to next?
So we start navigating down the first floor. A couple more officers, very quickly, Sergeant Monzone got back inside the school with us. We started moving from west to east on the first floor of the school building, and shortly thereafter, the east doors popped open on the other side of the hallway.
Who is on the other side of the hallway?
So those doors came open, and it was actually another police team of Coral Springs guys that were going to now started coming in from the east side of the school.
Now, were those all BSO, Coral Springs?
I believe it was mostly Coral Springs, but I don't know everybody who was in that stack.
Was there any plan at that point?
The only plan was as soon as that door opened, I said, I don't remember if I verbalized it over the radio or if I said it down the hallway, blue, 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 because I was pretty convinced that it was police officers. When that door opened, I heard somebody talk. It's a police officer that works for us. He's got a pretty distinct voice. He's got a pretty deep voice. I knew it was him. He said that he saw my shiny bald head, and he knew that it was me on the other side. So there was no risk of a blue-on-blue shooting. We had identified each other as police officers in that same hallway. Tactically, it doesn't make sense to move two teams down a hallway towards each other. Bad guy pops out in the middle of us. Now we're just shooting at each other to address the bad guy. So I turned over the first floor to them, and I took my team and I moved up to the second floor.
And you just referenced that you don't know if you were using your radio or you were shouting down the hall or speaking loudly. If your radio isn't working, what do you do?
You have to find a way to communicate, whether it's shouting down the hallway, send runners, whatever it takes to get information to the people that need information.
Is a radio not working a reason to not continue your duty as a law enforcement officer?
No.
Are you actually trained on what to do if your radio is malfunctioning or if you can't hear each other?
I don't know that we necessarily have training on it. You adapt and you deal with it. In a situation like that, radio, not radio. I know initially that I did not have a whole lot of radio transmission anyway. I was not really going to take my hand off my weapon to work my radio, fully believing that any minute I could engage somebody. So at that point, even running to the school initially, the radio wasn't a concern for me.
You move to the second floor, and what happens next?
Get up to the second floor, start moving from west to east across the second floor, come into contact with some classrooms. The classrooms are locked. I made eye contact with a girl inside one of the classrooms. I kind of motioned for her to come open the door. She did great. She did not come open the door. She held true to the code red protocol. I was there in full police uniform, as you can see in that video. She would not come open the door for me. I motioned for her to come open the door. Still wouldn't come open the door. I said to the team that, at this point, I thought the behavior was odd, so I believe that the shooter could have been in that classroom. I relayed that to my team. I took out my ASP. I actually have it on me here. It has a porcelain on the tip of it, so I could break windows. I broke that little small window that classrooms have, reached in, opened the door, and we made entry into the room. Not quite sure what we were going to do. Turned out, obviously, the shooter was not in there, and they were just adhering to their code red protocol as they should have.
What was the name of the tool that you just...
An ASP.
Your Honor, may I have permission to show the jury?
Sure. This is the porcelain tip here. I don't know if you want to touch it, see it. This is also an expandable baton. You can break windows with it. It expands to, I don't know, about this long. But this is porcelain here, used to break window in emergency situations, somebody trapped in a car, whatever it may be. But it'll break windows, and I use it to break multiple windows that day at Douglas.
After you broke the window and you opened the door, you look around, what do you see?
There were a bunch of students in there. There was a teacher in there. I asked the teacher that if everybody in that classroom was there from the beginning. She said yes, that everyone in this classroom had been here from the beginning. So clearly the suspect wasn't in there. I don't know if there was a kid in that classroom that he had an ROTC uniform on, but a regular ROTC uniform, like the full regular uniform, not like a polo, but like the blue shirt and the like police pants. And he had that on. Pulled him out to the side because some of the intel that we had was that we were looking for an ROTC student. I talked to him for a minute. It was clear that he wasn't who we were looking for, and then we continued on clearing down the hallway.
Once you cleared that hallway, did you come into contact with any victims on the second floor?
I don't believe anybody was shot on the second floor.
What do you do next?
So as we began clearing down the hallway, I had to break multiple windows. I started losing manpower. Obviously, clearly, we had just unsecured these rooms. I did not know whether or not the shooter was still in the school, so I couldn't evacuate anybody. I didn't want to pull them in the hallway, and then next thing you know, he pops out of the next classroom over, and he comes out and he's got a bunch of targets in the hallway. So I ended up losing manpower. I started leaving police officers in room as guards at the door, and by the time I got towards the end of the hallway, I had run out of manpower. And it was right about that time that BSO SWAT team had come on scene and made contact with me on the second floor.
You just used the term manpower. How important is it to have the amount of bodies that you need in order to properly clear a building?
A building that size, and especially with the number of victims, especially on the first floor, people needed to be in on the first floor starting to evacuate victims. The first floor was cleared fairly quickly, and there were quite a number of victims, and the more people, the better. Organized as you can be to start getting people out and get them over to the casualty collection point.
So, for example, if there were police officers that were around and able to help, would it be important that they help?
Yes.
When you do you go to the third floor?
I made it to the third floor, but not on the initial clear. I made it to the third floor. So we had finished the second floor. The sheriff's office kind of took over clearing the 3rd floor with the assistance of some of our CSPD SWAT guys. Once that was determined that the shooter was no longer in the school, I went back down to the 1st floor. We had intelligence that perhaps the shooter was on the 3rd floor and that he was dead. I kind of wanted to see for myself, so I did go back in, and that's how I ended up on the 3rd floor. But it was not the shooter; it was Mr. Wang.
When you got to the 3rd floor, were you needed in any way to assist any of the victims on the 3rd floor?
No, I was not.
Once you understood that it was not the shooter that had been killed and it was instead Mr. Wang, where did you go to next? Where did you go to next?
At that point, went back downstairs. The 1300 building was cleared pretty quickly. A TOC was set up there, which is a Tactical Operations Center. Right now, by this time, there's quite a bit of resources showing up. I am not sure if the main command post had been set up, but a Tactical Operations Center is like kind of a smaller area away from the main command post where the decisions are made as far as, all right, who's going to take what piece of the pie here and start clearing the school. So in that room was myself. I was in there. The BSO SWAT commander was in there. Our SWAT, the Coral Springs SWAT commander was in there, and we started kind of formulating how the school was going to be cleared.
Did you assist in rendering aid to any of the victims that day other than Coach Hickson?
Other than checking the pulse of Aaron Feiss and instructing Gil Monzon and Wilkins to get Chris Hickson out, I did not render aid to anybody.
And is that because the other officers that actually entered the building were already taking care of the 3rd floor?
So, yes, they were already, by the time they were already on the 3rd floor rendering aid to the victims on the 3rd floor. The people on the 1st floor had already been evacuated out. So at the time, I didn't come across any other victims that needed aid or that were alive.
Prior to this date, did you know who Scot Peterson was?
I did not.
Judge, I have nothing further to this witness.
Okay, cross-examination, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Captain.
Sir?
First of all, thank you for your, was it 22 years of service?
Yes.
I'm extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're with Coral Springs Police Department, correct?
That is correct.
That is a completely different agency than BSO, Broward Sheriff's Office, correct?
That is correct.
You guys have different 911 centers, correct?
That is correct.
And when any students, for example, made cellular calls from the 1200 building, those calls went to Coral Springs, correct?
I do not know where all the 911 calls went.
Okay. The information that would have come in to Coral Springs doesn't automatically get shared with BSO, correct?
I am not sure at the time how the dispatch centers worked or interoperated with each other.
Okay. Are you familiar with a concept called patching radios?
Yes, I am.
Okay, tell us how that happens. How does that get initiated? How does that work?
Well, I'm not technical as far as how patching. I know that when we ask our dispatch to patch channels together, they can patch channels together. Like if they want to patch, two of our channels together, so we operate on a couple of different channels. Say, for instance, we have our Coral Springs main channel, and then we have our Coral Springs patrol TAC channel. They can patch those together. I know they can patch interagency as well. It just requires that agency to ask for the patch and then to make the patch.
Okay. And it doesn't take that long to do a patch, correct?
I couldn't tell you exactly. Again, not my dispatch is my area of expertise, but no.
Got it. But the idea also is that when you patch radios, then you're sharing the information, correct?
Correct.
You're not operating separately. You're now hearing all the same real-time intelligence, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, you arrived at the school, and it's a 45-acre school, correct?
Correct. Well, I don't know the size, but I know it's a big campus.
It's huge.
Yes.
Right? So you wouldn't have just gotten lucky to go to the 1200 building, correct?
Objection, counsel testifying.
No, that's overruled. Go ahead, sir, you can
Go
answer
ahead.
that question.
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
You didn't just get lucky and just go into the 1200 building. You had some real-time intelligence, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, how did that intelligence come to you? How did you learn to go to the 1200 building and not the other 45 acres?
So as I was driving north on Coral Springs Drive, which turns into Pine Island once you cross under the Sawgrass Expressway, Tim Burton, who was a school SRO who had gotten to on the scene over there, had put over our radio that the building was a 1200 building, was the 1200 building. He called it the freshman building. And one of the biggest pieces of intel he gave it was the third-story building on the north side of the campus. And that's where he directed us to.
Okay. So you specifically knew over your radio that you needed to go into the 1200 building, correct?
I did.
And Tim Burton is a Coral Springs police officer, is he not?
He is.
Okay. Were you monitoring your radio as you were approaching the school?
Absolutely.
And you were listening to all the things that were being said over the Coral Springs radio, correct?
Yes.
You would have then heard at 2:30:04 that there were 3 people shot in room 1216 in the freshman building, correct?
I don't remember specifically what transmissions, but I did know that people were shot inside the 1200 building.
Okay. Did you know at the time whether Coral Springs ever contacted BSO to share that information with them?
I certainly did not know that.
Did you know whether that information specifically, that there were 3 people shot in room 1216 in the 1200 freshman building?
Objection, counsel testifying.
Well, hold on, I didn't get to the end of the question yet. Go ahead, what's your question?
Whether that information, did you know whether that information had ever been shared at all with BSO?
Yeah, it's overruled. Go ahead, so you can answer the question.
I have no idea if that was shared or not.
Did you think, though, as an experienced officer, that that likely would have been done?
At that point, I was not thinking about whether or not we were sharing information with BSO.
I do. Now, you arrived at about 2:31, 2:32, correct?
I believe so.
And while you didn't know it, the shooter was already gone, correct?
Missed him by 4 minutes and 52 seconds, I believe.
Got it. And did you know that there was just one shooter or multiple shooters?
I did not know.
Okay. And tell the jurors about the +1 rule. What are you supposed to think when you get to a scene if you're not sure how many shooters there are?
We should always consider that there's more than one perpetrator on anything, whether you're clearing a car, clearing a house. If you find one person, just assume that there's another person. So you can assume that there might be somebody else. You just don't want to get complacent.
And it was your words, I think I heard you on direct, you said that the Coral Springs Police Department's phones were blowing up, right?
That was a transmission made by a dispatcher to Sergeant Reed.
Indicating that there were tons of calls coming into Coral Springs Police Department, correct?
Yes.
Now, when you went into the building, it was to the west end of the 1200 building, correct?
That is correct.
Can I show you this photograph and you tell me whether this fairly and accurately depicts the side of the building that you went in on?
Yes, that looks like the west side of the building.
Okay, and can you show us where you saw Aaron Feist? Is this the door that you went into on the west
I
side?
believe we actually went into the main hallway doors. I think that's what the video will show. I think this door here is for the stairwell. Aaron Feist, not specific, was somewhere out in this area here, I believe.
Got it. And you remember that he was literally outside of the 1200 building, correct?
That is correct.
Did you know at the time when you went into the west side of the 1200 building where my client was actually positioned?
No, I had no clue.
Okay. Now, you discussed you even said, I know this is hard to hear, right? When you're talking about when you go into a building, that you're not there, your first priority is not to actually treat people, but to try to identify where the shooter's located, correct?
That is correct.
And I think you made it clear to them, and just tell us why you said, I don't remember the exact words, but you were almost like uncomfortable saying that, right? That you're not there to just stop and treat everybody. Can you tell us why you said that?
Certainly, it's not easy to hear that law enforcement is going to bypass your loved ones or injured people who clearly need aid, children, adults, whatever it may be, in order, basically people screaming for your help, and you're running by them and you're leaving them behind because you know that you have a job to do, which is to prevent him, a shooter, from making more victims like the ones that you're passing over. It's not easy to hear. It's not easy to discuss. Nobody wants to hear that. But it's the reality of what is expected of us.
I got you. And I appreciate that you softened it earlier. It is. It's very hard. I mean, and even if it's a child, it's the same theory. You don't deviate from that, correct?
That is correct.
So if there's a child yelling for help, in pain, that's literally bleeding out, you have to walk over them to continue to try to identify where the shooter or shooters might be located, correct?
If there is active shooting. And correct. Without the active shooting, it kind of becomes a blend of slowing it down a little bit because, you know, for instance, this case is a perfect example. The shooter was already gone. So it slowed down and became a blend of active shooter response and rendering aid response.
But you didn't know that. When you're going in, right, you didn't know whether the shooter or shooters were still in that building, correct?
I believe the shooter was still in the building, but right. I did not know.
Right. And so your plan, the way you're trained, the way they're all trained, is you step over bodies and you keep going, correct?
Again, this one was kind of a blend because we didn't have the shooting, and that's kind of why I covered with Hickson. You know, technically active shooter response wouldn't have been rescue Chris Hickson and get him out. It would have been bypass Chris Hickson if there was shooting. But without the shooting, let's slow this down a little bit. Let's render aid, knowing that, once again, once the shooting starts, we are going to wherever that shooting is occurring, and we're leaving everybody behind.
You had the luxury, though, of having a team of people with you on the west side, correct?
That is correct.
And how many people were with you total?
I don't know. I wasn't looking behind me. I know initially there was 4, but I don't know. I wasn't concentrating on what was happening behind me. My focus was forward and directing that.
Could there have been as many as 6 or maybe even more with you?
Certainly. There may have been.
Okay. Now imagine you're alone. Okay? Alone. And you go in there. Okay? And the first priority is to try to find out where the shooter or shooters are located, correct?
That is correct.
And so if you're alone, you're not pulling Chris Hickson out by yourself and treating him when you think there might be active shooters in that place, correct?
That is correct.
You have to go and clear out. You start on the first floor, correct?
That is correct.
Describe for the jurors first, again, imagining one person is going in alone, assuming they even know that there's maybe a shooter or shooters in the building, right? Tell us what you go through to clear each classroom, right? You do one classroom at a time, correct?
That is correct.
You walk in and you don't just stick your head in and go, okay, it looks good, right? Because someone could be hiding, right?
That is correct.
Tell us what you go through to clear each room of the 1200 building.
Are you talking as a single officer? Or are you talking
let's do
as
that, because I think that applies here.
Well, as a single officer, we have the luxury in Broward County, you're only going to be a single officer for a very short period of time before somebody shows up. Especially in Coral Springs, it's going to be a very short period of time before somebody else shows up to give you backup. To sit there and, you know, being on the SWAT team, we always train 2 to a room anyway. However, if there's active shooting going on, you may not get that luxury. You don't get that luxury of having somebody else with you. You have a job to do. I don't necessarily think of, you know, I don't want to speculate of how it would go down if you were a lone person in that school for 10 minutes, because I don't know how it would go down. If the shooter was in there, I could tell you how it would go down. As soon as the shooting started, that's where you would go.
All right, so if we can just return to my question, you got one person, and that person would start with the first classroom on the first floor, okay? Describe for us what that person would do and how long it would take and where they would search. Again, put us there with words. Okay. What would they have to go through?
So if you were by yourself and you had no active stimulus and you were tasked with clearing, you know, start moving your way across the first floor because you didn't have the bodies with you, you would get to the door. You'd have to figure out a way to breach the door, whether it was with the ASP. Again, all the doors were locked, whether it's ASP or other means. Reality is I got lucky. We were able to break the windows and get inside the doors. By yourself, you would reach in. You would open the door. Again, single person entry in a room isn't what you want to do. It's not what we ever train on a SWAT team.
Why? Why would you want to go in by yourself?
Because there's hard angles that you're going to miss. You're going to miss it.
And what happens if you miss it?
You could get killed. You get killed. A bad guy could be, if you come in and there's a hard angle to the left and you decide to take the hard angle to the right and he's behind you, you could get killed.
And I'm assuming you had a vest on, right?
I did.
Any other gear that would have protected you?
Nope, I did not.
You didn't have a pistol. You had a rifle too.
I had a rifle.
That helps. You didn't use just a little pistol.
Are you asking if I wouldn't or if I didn't?
There was a reason why you chose to use a rifle instead of your pistol. Why?
I believed I was going to get in a gunfight with somebody, and rifles are better than pistols.
Got it. And so a single person goes into a room, and again, what are they physically doing? Are you looking at every possible place that somebody could be hiding?
Again, a single person isn't necessarily going to go into a room. It's not necessarily going to happen that way. The reality is if a single officer, active shooter responds, you're going in and you're going to start searching. You probably will end up staying in the hallways to start searching through a school to try to find a shooter. Because if the shooter's on the 3rd floor and I'm trying to get into every alcove, every room, every bathroom, and everything, I don't know what's happening on the 3rd floor. I may get clues as I move through. I may run by a classroom and I may hear, he's in here. I may hear screaming. I may hear something that would then prompt me to direct my attention to that room. Now, if that did happen and my attention is directed to a specific room, there's also a hierarchy of how you're going to deal with your threats. So if I breach that door, I go in that room, that real threat is going to take priority over any geographic threat. So if I go in there and the bad guy's in there, he's a real threat. I don't care what's on my left. I don't care what's on my right. As a sole officer, I'm still going in, and I'm going to deal with that.
I understand. But when you walk in and you stand in the hallway, and there's no real-time intelligence to tell you where to go, what specific classroom, because you had the benefit of knowing specifically that kids were killed in a specific room, 1216, I think it was. But let's just say hypothetically, you just go into the 73-yard building, and you look in the hallway and you don't see any shooter. You have to assume that there's shooter or shooters located potentially in any single classroom, correct?
That is correct.
Because at any moment they could come out and kill you, correct?
That is correct.
And if you're not wearing a vest, you will likely die with an automatic weapon, correct?
Correct.
So before you start walking in a hallway, or before you start running around by yourself, you must go through and ensure that there's nobody who could come out of a classroom and as you proceed down the hallway, kill you. Isn't that correct?
Without the active stimulus, yes. Without that active stimulus of gunfire, it would definitely pose a difficult problem.
That's correct. And if you're not hearing anything from the 3rd floor, let's say, because that was the phenomenon that they were dealing with, you couldn't hear shots.
Objection, counsel has.
Yeah, Mr. Igosh, this seems to be an ongoing thing. The state objects and I sustain it, and you keep doing it. So am I not making myself clear on this rule?
I'll keep going. Okay,
No, sir. I want you to finish and answer my question. Am I not making myself clear on these rulings?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's improper for me to make statements in front of the jury. You are not the witness. You are the lawyer. Ask the witness a question that ends in a question mark. Go ahead, sir.
Did you know whether the students on the 3rd floor could hear the shots on the 1st or 2nd floor?
I don't know.
Okay. So if somebody cannot hear any shots on the 2nd or 3rd floor as they go through the 1st floor, they've got to clear the 1st floor thinking that there might be shooter or shooters on the 1st floor. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And then they've got to move to the 2nd floor and clear every classroom, and assuming it's one person, they've got to go through and do it by themselves. Correct?
I don't want to speculate what it would be for, again, what might have been if only a single officer showed up, because I don't know what might have happened if a single officer showed up and only was there by himself and had to clear that entire structure by themselves. That would take an inordinate amount of time for somebody to, first of all, it could never be safely done because every room you go into, you're exposing yourself to an angle. So I don't want to speculate what a single officer would do trying to clear that building without hearing gunshots to draw them anywhere.
Right. So when you say an inordinate amount of time, what do you estimate it would take one person to be able to clear the 1st floor alone? Let's start there.
Objection, speculation.
Yeah, that's a statement.
How long did it take you, with the team of people you had, to clear the 1st floor?
I did not clear the 1st floor. I partially cleared the 1st floor, then we moved it up to the 2nd floor.
All right. Why did you only partially clear the first floor?
The other team came in from the east side, and it created a blue-on-blue situation where we'd be moving down a hallway towards each other, and so that's bad tactics.
I got you. So how long did it take you to clear half of the first floor with your team?
I don't even know if it was half. It was a section of the first floor. I couldn't speculate. It's on video. You would be able to see how long it took. I don't even think we made it into that many classrooms on the first floor, my team, until we went up to the second floor.
Is there any way that you can at least just give a ballpark as to how long you think it took to clear just a portion of the classrooms on the first floor with your team?
I would.
Objection, asked and answered.
No, that one's overruled. Go ahead, sir, you can answer the question.
I would be guessing. Repeat the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Just a ballpark of how long it took you to clear the section that you did on the first floor with the team of people that you had.
With the 5 to 6 people that we had and what the little area, I mean, I don't even remember exactly even how many rooms we went in. I really would just be guessing. I don't know. I know when we made entry into the classrooms, a single classroom would take a minute or two.
Okay. And so if we apply a minute or two to each classroom with a team of 6.
Well, that's a minute or two for 2 guys making an entry while the other guys are going to the next classroom.
Okay.
So that clearly would speed things up. I mean, 2 to a room, 2 people in this room, 2 people in this room. As you're moving through, it would clearly speed things up.
Okay. And do you know how many people were on the other team that came in on the east side?
No, I don't. I know at the time I did not know how many people were coming in, and I would be speculating now to tell you the number of people. I know there is a number of people, and that number of people is known. I just don't know it.
Okay. And they were clearing half of the first floor, that team. You cleared a few classrooms on the first floor, correct?
I don't even know if we made it into a classroom on the first floor. I know we had made the entry into the school. We had started moving towards the first floor. Within a minute or two, obviously, extracting Chris Hickson. Within a minute or two of kind of moving through, the other team had already breached the other door and were coming in. And it was a pretty quick, hey, we're leaving this behind. We're giving it to the other team. We're moving up to the second floor.
Okay. And did your team clear the second floor?
Yes.
How long approximately did it take your team, and how many people was the team consisting of now?
I don't know the exact number we were up to. It was more than 6.
Okay. More than 6 people clearing each classroom on the second floor, correct?
Correct.
Approximately how long did that take?
Again, it would be on video exactly how long. I don't have a number in my head. I know as we started to go through, clearly we were slowed down by having to breach windows, slowed down because I had to leave bodies behind in those classrooms to protect the students in those classrooms, not knowing. And then we finally got to, and we were delayed as well when we started getting the delayed intel that the shooter was on the 3rd floor coming down to the 2nd floor. Turns out they were watching a video that was 20 minutes delayed, but we were on the 2nd floor, all lined up in the hallway, truly believing he was going to come down to the 2nd floor, and he never showed up, and we pretty much realized. So we did get delayed there for a very short period of time, maybe 2 minutes.
So what I heard you say was you were delayed as you're going to each classroom because not every classroom door was open. The word you used was breach to get in?
Correct.
And by breach, that would mean more time to take out your ASP, correct? And then open it up, and then smash the window, right?
Correct.
To get in, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
What would be the steps? You tell us what the steps would be to breach and to get into a classroom.
As described earlier, remove the asp, take the cap off, break the window, clear out the window with the other end of the asp, reach in the door, open the door.
Okay. And so how many minutes would that add on to one classroom search?
Maybe 1.
Okay. And were you able to just give me a ballpark estimate of how long it took you to clear the 2nd floor with your team of 6?
I really don't have a concept of time for moving through. I do know couldn't even tell you the exact number of rooms that I went into. Obviously, high stress, a lot going on. Clearly, the whole thing's on video. The video will tell you every room I went in. It will tell you how long I spent in every room. I can tell you that it would take 2 minutes for 2 guys to go in, clear a room, make contact, maybe quickly debrief a teacher, maybe see if anyone is injured, and move on to the next one.
Okay. And then you do that on the 3rd floor as well, correct?
I never made it to the 3rd floor except for what I described earlier.
Okay. Just a final question for you. Did you ever see my client at all while you were there?
I did.
You did or did not?
I did.
When did you see him?
As described, when we were the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC was set up in that 1300 building. Was in there, again, with the BSO SWAT commander, the Coral Springs SWAT commander, other BSO guys, other Coral Springs guys, formulating the plan. Officer Peterson did come in there. I don't remember the exact conversation. It had more to do with the layout of the school and drawing a map of the school.
I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't know that you were there for that. You were there when he was actually drawing out and trying to be of service as to the layout of the school, correct?
Objection, counsel testifying.
Yes, that's sustained.
Did you see my client draw anything?
I don't know if he drew it or if he was describing it to the BSO SWAT commander. He might have drawn it. It would have made more sense for him to draw it than to try to describe it. So I imagine that he drew it, but I don't remember specifically.
Did it appear that he was being of service to fellow officers?
He was certainly trying to give intelligence at that time, yes.
Okay. Sir, I thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay, based on that, any redirect?
Yes.
Go ahead.
When you finally saw Scot Peterson, approximately how long after the shooter had left the building was this?
I don't know what time it was. It was after we had cleared the 1200 building. Rescue operations had already been initiated. There were already people being brought out. I had already gone up to the 3rd floor and seen Mr. Wang. I had already come back downstairs. We had already cleared the 1300 building, and that's why the TOC was set up there. I couldn't give you an exact time frame, but it was a significant amount of time.
So it was after all of the rescue had already taken place that Mr. Peterson left his position and went into a room full of cops, and that's where you saw him?
That is where I saw him.
Does the +1 rule alleviate you of your duty to run into the direction of shots being fired?
It does not.
I want it to be crystal clear to the members of the jury because you keep explaining the difference of when there's stimulus and when there isn't. Do you slowly go alcove to alcove, room to room, floor by floor, if there's active stimulus?
No, you do not. You run direct to threat.
So would you be going alcove to alcove, room to room, if there's active stimulus, or would you be skipping past some of those steps, just like you skipped past Chris Hickson, and heading directly towards the sound of gunfire?
You would run past everybody towards gunfire, and again, it's just direct to threat, so there's not more victims being made.
So in that entire hypothetical that you just did with the defense attorney about how you cleared the first floor and how you would clear and how long it would take, was that all under the hypothetical of if there's no stimulus?
Yes.
You talked about real-time intelligence. Are the sounds of gunshots real-time intelligence?
Absolutely.
So if you're standing somewhere and you can hear gunshots for almost 5 minutes, 70 rounds, is that stimulus?
100% stimulus.
And does that stimulus, should it have an effect on any reasonable law enforcement officer?
Yes.
You were asked about whether you might get shot. Is the fear of getting shot a reason not to enter into that building?
It is definitely not a reason not to enter that building.
I have nothing else.
Based on that, any recall?
No, Your Honor.
State, is the witness excused?
Yes, Judge.
So you may sit down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State, that's the last witness for today.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, going back to that first Wednesday that I met you, remember when I told you sometimes it won't be quite 9 to 5, that schedule is fluid. Just based on some scheduling issues, we're going to pause on the state's presentation at this point. So with the same admonition as always, that please do not discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else. No research on this case, directly or indirectly, from any source whatsoever, the internet, social media, anything on your computer, anything on your phone. I'm going to ask you all to please continue. Do not watch the news. Do not read the newspaper. There's a hockey game on tonight for those of you that might be your type of thing, maybe or maybe not. I know it didn't work too well with the basketball game last night, but we'll try again tonight. In any event, please no media of any kind. Tomorrow I have a very short docket. Otherwise, I'm going to ask that you all be back at the jury room 9:15. 9:15 tomorrow. And the one juror that does have an issue regarding the employer, I am working on that. I know we have a 10-day window. I think tomorrow will be day 6 of your service. So I am working on that, and I will keep you updated as to that. I did get all the information from the court deputy. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, if you will put the notepads in the envelopes, they will be waiting for you when you come back tomorrow. I hope y'all have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow, which is Friday, June 9th at 9:15 a.m. in the jury room. Have a good night. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. State anything you need me to address before we recess until, let's call it 9:30 tomorrow. Defense, anything you need me to address before tomorrow?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to do a sidebar, though.
Well, the jury's not here, so fire away. What's up?
I would still prefer to do it sidebar.
Okay, that request is denied. The jury's not here. Yes, sir. What can I do for you?
I was admonished numerous times from this jury. I want to do everything in my power with as much respect I have for this court, not to deviate from the rules that the court has set up for me.
Not my rules. The rules of trial practice and procedure.
Judge, I'm still being completely sincere in this way.
That wraps up segment number 4 in today's coverage of the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource officer. Keep it here and press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage on this case as it continues to unfold. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.